Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is a particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Speaking of Patreons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon, as this show is actually sponsored by Patreon. So a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Sarah Griffiths, Rob H, Ben White, Maximum Gravy, Austin Whitsitt, John Kays, Tommy Swagnut, Michael Kahn, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Mel B. Styles, Troy Shuker, Bose Nail, Samson, Maris, Hairy Blade, Mobile Mac 777, Neo the One, Lost Cat FE, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Dal West Watson, Mike, Muted, Dick Earth Skeptic, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic936, Life is Short, theflatearthchannel.com, Texas Mike, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I will hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show.
Your new video?
Yeah,
Should check it out.
you should.
What's it on?
What's it on? In a sense, like everybody like creating their truth, like in the way you could look at it. Everybody's exalting themselves, right? Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but like that seems to be like the world's way, right? The unbeliever's way, to exalt yourself above others. Your truth, right? I got the truth. Nobody else. I'm peddling the real truth. Everybody else is not peddling it. Listen to me, right? That's how the world works.
Yeah, that's the new agey philosophy I was referring to. Excuse me 1 second. I'm gonna walk into work, but I'm gonna put my headphones on.
Right. And that's how certain Christians behave too. They behave like the world. They start exalting themselves above others. They got the correct doctrine, right? Listen to them. But yeah. Hey Nathan,
Hello.
are you recording yet?
Always if I'm here.
Right.
Did you want to say?
I guess I'll use this. Go on.
I was going to say, plug your show, plug your channel name.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might as well plug in my channel. What did I call it?
Righteous
The last
Force.
video I did. What's that?
The channel name is Righteous Force.
Right. Channel name is Righteous Force. And the video is called Decent and in Order, right? And I focus on who's the greatest. A lot of people in life, right? Like this was an example with the disciples back then, right? They were arguing about who's the greatest among them, right? And this happens among Christians, and this also happens among the Gentiles, right? Everybody's out there boasting who's the greatest. Like rappers, they'll be like about their bling bling, their woman and their cars. You know what I mean? I'm the greatest.
Yeah,
right?
I thought you were having a dig at me at the beginning, and then you were like game show hosts. I was like, oh, okay, I see where he's going with this.
You watched it, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's just what came to me. I'm like, well, Decent and in Order. Like, you run the show, right? You have to be in charge, and you have to like, how do I put it? If you weren't in charge of your show and everybody just hopped in, and it would just be chaos. It'd be like
The
it wouldn't
analogy
be
was
Decent and in
the
Order
analogy
anymore.
in the video is better. You'd have to compare it to me just because I suggested in my vain way that it was about me when
Right.
it wasn't. But you compared it to an audience, right? if just the audience
but
just
actually,
decide to pipe up and stroll onto the stage and say whatever they want,
right.
then yeah, go ahead. I'm taking over your video. Sorry.
But I actually was thinking about you when I said that, though. I was thinking in the
I
sense like
knew it.
not just you in general. Well, I'm around you all the time, right? So like, you know what I'm saying? Like I use examples that pertain like in my life, right? The Lord will point me to those things. But I wasn't like doing a dig at you or anything like that. You know what I mean? I was using you as a good example, right?
No, I totally get it. I'm only
So,
joking.
yeah, right. But yeah, because a lot of times, you know, ballers will complain about how you run the show, but it's your show, right? They got to respect how you run your show. They can't just come in and just tell you how to run your show. You know what I'm saying? That would be exalting themselves over you, and they're not respecting, you know, their place and your place. So yeah,
You have the name of the video so people can search for it, because if they just type in Righteous Force, you being a relatively
right.
small channel, they won't find you.
It's decent and in order. It's called Decent and in order, and then the subtitle is Who's the Greatest. So that's all in the title: Decent and in order, and then Who's the Greatest.
That's on Righteous Force channel, YouTube.
Right. Yeah, I started that in the morning. Like the Lord was like stirring me up, and he gave me like all the scripture verses, and he sliced through it one way, right? And then when it came in the evening to record, I was like, what am I looking at? You know what I mean? Like it wasn't that clear anymore, so I had to stir myself up, right? And then as I stirred myself up and I started looking and studying myself to show myself approved, then it all came like I was stirred up and it was clear again. It was starting to become clear. And as I was going through the video, the Lord was slicing at it through another angle, right? There's like multiple ways to slice through, explain something, to get something across to your audience, right? And it came out interesting. It came out good, because as I was going through it, I'm like, oh, I was getting more, right? It was like getting put together more and more. So it was really interesting. It was an example of like the Lord exalts us, not we exalt ourselves, right? And I'm gonna go more in that in like the next video and how that works. But yeah, because I'm thinking about, wow, like for these Bible studies, if I were to do it by myself, I would just, it'd be a nightmare. I'd be trying to cobble things together and whatever, and it doesn't work. I noticed I have to be led for the teaching to come across, right? And it's this way, it's actually effortless, right? Because it's the Lord using you. It's not you. You know what I mean? So I'm starting to realize this more and more. It's like, yeah, I just let the Lord do his thing and you just kind of like, whatever, you know?
That's
That
a
way it's the
dangerous.
easy way. You're not,
It is a
what's
dangerous
that?
road to be on, though, because you can take that too far, as I'm sure you
What do you
appreciate.
mean?
Well, you can end up just sort of it always being put it in God's hands when actually you need to make some decisions that are difficult, and leaving it to God, yeah. But God also leaves it to you to have some intuition and some forethought and, you know, things like that.
Well, yeah, I also have to like study and I have to like make sure I look at things. But then when it comes to actually presenting it, the Lord steps in and uses what he put in me. You know, I have to read God's word to put that in me, right? And then as I'm going through the study, the Holy Spirit brings to remembrance what God put in me, and then draws from like other things, like from your show, right? How you ran your show, and it just puts it all together. He's the one orchestrating it and coordinating it, but I still have to study and I still have to, you know what I mean? I still have to do my part. I had to like shower, I had to shave, you know, even though I didn't feel like this was going to come out. I'm like, oh, am I even going to do a video? But I'm like, no, you know, faith gets ready. So I got ready, I showered, I shaved, I got in front of the camera, I set it up. I stayed in front there for like an hour looking over things, stirring myself up, right? And then, yeah, I still have to do my part, but when it's showtime, it's the Lord that does the work.
Maybe.
I'm
Yeah.
down.
You're also very loud.
All my lights went on today when I was on my way to work. The ABS light went on. The VDC slip light went on. Last time that happened, my calipers exploded.
Where was that car actually made? Have you ever looked on the door jamb?
No.
Next time you open the either passenger or driver side door, depending, have a look on the sticker. It has the paint codes and various other things on it, right? It'll say somewhere specifically where it's made. I watch a lot. I was just going to say I watch a lot of Scotty Kilmer, and you know his general advice is buy Japanese, and by buying Japanese he means buy something that's actually manufactured in Japan, as opposed to something that's manufactured in wherever in the States, you know, under a Japanese badge.
Well, it couldn't have been made in Japan because didn't they sell it to Nissan sold to what's that company?
Renault. Yeah, but it's still going to have Japanese manufacturing plants for the Japanese market. But more likely is that wherever you are, that's the home of the manufacturing for that particular vehicle. But not in all cases. So, for instance, the car I bought, I specifically bought it for the reason that it is made in Japan. So when you open the door jamb, it says "Made in Japan" on it.
I'll check.
As we're all talking shop and work, I'll do a little plug to a channel. We'll see how this goes. So let's give a bit of preamble first. So for the last 2 years, I've been doing acoustics, right? Learning how acoustics work as an amateur, and then treating my room, along with learning how OBS and Voice Meter Banana work at a more complex level. So I've got a better understanding how the streaming works. Also learning recording skills again. I'm reasonably familiar. I did it in college, so I know where to look for the information I'm hoping to find. And I've looked, because I keep getting, it's probably 1% of the show, nowhere near enough to cause any irritation, but something distorts. Now, it's normally when there's not even anything that loud. So it would be just 10th man speaking or just me speaking. I at first thought it was just me, and it's not. It's over other people talking. So I'm trying to figure out what this is. I've spent a long time trying to figure out what this distortion is caused by. And I've asked a lot of other YouTubers, and a few of them have got back to me with responses and given me their opinion on what it is. I've gone to timestamps in their own videos to show where this distortion's the same on their streams as it is on mine, and so on and so forth. Now, yesterday, Present Day Production, which is a relatively new channel, because when COVID hit, they started up a YouTube channel because they lost all of their live business. So they just went, well, got to do something. So they started a YouTube channel. Now, they started off by showing their acoustic treatment, which is what I got into. But over time, I've been listening more and more to how they record things. It's very interesting, and obviously I want to improve the quality of the show, so that's the main reason for watching. But yesterday, they did their first ever live stream. Now, as soon as I tuned in, I went, that sounds great. And I listened for a good few minutes, long enough to know whether or not they'd get the typical distortion that most of the streamers I asked this question to have got on their streams, and they didn't have it. So I quickly checked my volume on my iPad that I was watching it, and I was like, oh, my volume is quite high. So I asked them from the live stream chat, is your live stream particularly low to avoid distortion? Because it sounds great, but it's a little bit low. And a couple of the people in the chat were like, it's not low, it's fine. And a couple of people went, yeah, it's a little bit low, maybe a couple of dB low. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But the guy responded, and he was like, no, the reason it's low is because this is our first live stream and we don't really know what we're doing. Which is a great disclaimer for somebody who's got a channel that is solely focused on recording and broadcasting and mastering and mixing, and you know, that's what they do. But he was honest enough to say, look, this is our first live stream on YouTube, so we don't know what we're doing. But the fact that he had fantastic sound was enough for me to ask him, what are you doing that I'm not? So I quickly did a comparison, went back to the most recent show, which was a members only live show, and checked what the levels, how they compared, and it was considerably lower. So I thought maybe just when you get up into the yellows on OBS or into the yellows on Voice Meter as I'm using it, maybe it just distorts when you've got a lot of people all compiling in with all the information having to be number crunched and then spat back out again, which is packet loss information. Maybe if it's just that little bit lower, like theirs was. I doubt it. They're professional recording engineers, so to hope that I just turn it down and get to the same quality is, optimistic. But by the same token, I have tried everything as far as I can. Obviously you don't know what you haven't tried, but as far as I can tell, everything I can think of trying, I've tried, and I've researched to find what causes this 1% of the show a little bit of a sound just while someone's talking, enough to make me go, that's not perfect. That I want to resolve that. To the point where I've dedicated hours to this. But anyway, we shall see. I've turned the show down, is the main reason for saying all of this after doing that. And, there's no particular reason why they happen to be lower. And if it's just coincidence and they end up turning it up and getting that crackly distortion that I'm talking about, then I'll make sure to tell them as well. So present day production, great live stream yesterday. Not that you'll be watching the show, I doubt it highly. But there we go. Check them out if you want to subscribe. They're really nice guys. If you're into this sort of thing, if you're into sound, acoustics, recording, engineering, mastering, all that sort of stuff, that's what they do on that channel. I love it. I'm sure people who are watching, there's going to be at least one or two that will also love it. Anyway, that's enough present day production plugs on YouTube. Hey Brian. Hey Tenth.
Hey Ned. Hey Nathan. When you said Tenth, I took your name and Tenth's name and I turned them into Nenth. Suddenly Nathan and Tenth.
Nenth Man is here.
Nenth Man is here. Nathan had a good one when he said Brianology. That was a good one.
Brianology? I didn't hear that.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
you
logical.
said it the other day.
Oh yeah. I thought it was new. Nathan, you know that thing with the sound. You sure it's not because you're not sending your final sound through a DAW, a digital audio workstation or something, where you could, like a Pro Tools or a Cubase, where Ableton is what I use. Something like that, or a Logic, the Apple Logic, something like that, where your final sound, you can literally see what's happening with the sound, especially with Ableton. You can see what's happening with the sound. You can literally go in and visually see where there's a distortion and fix it or whatever, stuff like that.
I can do that. In the editing software, it gives me various different things that I can see in terms of the audio timeline once it's been produced. I can see it in great detail. But in terms of seeing what I'm talking about, in terms of that distortion, you're not going to see that in the waveform, no matter how detailed it is. It's not something you're going to notice. It's it's not clipping. So I know what you're saying. You're saying, right, well, if there's a distortion, then it's going to be right up against the top edge of the waveform's capabilities of being, in that readout. You'll see it hitting the top. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's clipping. The reason I don't think it's clipping is because it happens when, does also happen when I'm loud, but it typically just happens at a random point. In other words, there'll be three people talking, then one person will talk, and then there'll be this mild distortion. And you're like, and it's right in the middle of someone talking, so it's not like it's going to show up separately or be a big peak that's going to, stand out in the waveform for you to notice what it is. It's not like that. So I've looked. And no, I don't run anything through a DAW. I don't want to add any latency. So there's already enough running it through Voicemeeter and OBS. I want it to be quick. In other words, when I talk to you, you talk to me, or we talk to Discord, or vice versa, there is very little latency, and I've gone out of my way to achieve that. If I run it through a DAW, it will add a bit of latency. I don't know how much, but I don't know what it would achieve. The only thing I considered using it for was when I wanted to use plugins, and I can't remember if I just didn't know or if OBS didn't allow it. Now they do, then there's no use. You can run that on OBS, and it's like running it on your master output channel. So you've got any compressors or whatever you'd put on your final line, and then individual lines can still be tinkered with in Voicemeeter. So the only one I've not got enough control over is you. In other words, there's no level I can do for you guys individually. You're all one level. So I have to kind of pick a compression and limiting level for your single line and an overall output gain that's about right for all of you. And, you tend to be the quietest most of the time, Brian. So, the compression I do apply and boost up the gain a bit more is mainly for you. But then I have to give a bit more compression than I like to keep 10th under control, and maybe a bit more limiter than I'd like because 10th man will always be too loud, etc., etc. But I don't need a DAW for any of that.
I should have kept my lapel mic instead of this Yeti.
The Yeti's fine. It's very clear. How you just sounded was perfect. So whatever distance when you're not really thinking about it and just comfortably sitting back and talking is perfect. A little bit of room ambience, but you're not going to be able to do anything about that.
Well, at least the fan is off.
sorry.
No, I said at least the fan is off.
Yeah, you sound fine.
I on purpose keep my microphone a little bit low. I don't make a point of having a brilliant microphone because I don't want the audience to get sick of hearing me my voice and complaining to you. Because I will talk a lot and I will overtake things and hijack points sometimes. And sometimes it's easier for me to have a mic that's lower because my voice is kind of deep. So that way I won't end up blasting out this big voice and doing everyone's head in. So it's easier, even if I raise my voice, it doesn't come through too loud. So that's why I keep the kind of microphone I have.
No, you're fine. In terms of level, you actually end up... You obviously are aware of this then, because like me, you've got a similar sort of tone in terms of the range that you use. So when I'm talking softly like now, I've got a very deep voice. Now that can boom through everybody else, even if I'm quieter than them. Now, QE noted to me, he's like, I can't hear you. And I thought to myself, I wonder why that is, because when I checked it on an SPL, played it through my main system with an SPL meter, checked it, and it was all the same level. And I'm like, why is he saying I'm too quiet? And then it occurred to me, maybe he's playing it through some PC speakers that are just very tinny. Suddenly, the fact that I've got a bassy voice, that ain't helping me when you're coming through a PC. So, sure enough, I picked up a phone, did exactly the same thing and tested it, which I hadn't done before, and listened to the show on a phone. I'm like, yeah, I am getting lost in amongst everyone else's voice because I'm just, relying on the fact that it's a bassy voice that will cut through. But that's not true if you haven't got a bassy speaker to reproduce it like a phone. So I've had to, again, one of the many considerations that are probably totally unnecessary and most people don't care about. And they'll only, at not a conscious level at all, they won't think about the fact that it sounds better. But I think subconsciously, if that's the right word, people will think about it. In other words, they'll notice without realizing it.
Yeah, well, I know what you're talking. I get your point about the latency with DAWs, but there's so many other pieces of software that are used, audio software that are used with DAWs, that they really work hard on the latency. I don't know how much extra latency you would get, but what you would have is a final situation, and you may not want this because it'd be like you're adding too much in maybe. But you'd have a final situation where you can control the amount of compression and limiting. You could, with compressors and limiters, you can boost the sound but not allow it go above a certain ceiling. But that also might affect the setup you've spent a lot of time putting together. I don't know.
No, I've got you. That's exactly what I wanted, and I can do that on OBS. So the OBS acts like one final line, and I can add a limiter to the final end output line and a compressor and add a little bit of gain, which is exactly what I do. I think what I was doing in that process in the final line was adding too much gain at the last stage, which is why I think it was distorting. In other words, if I need to get louder, I need to start adding it earlier rather than at the last stage. So that's what I've done. I've turned down the overall output and I'm looking at it, and yeah, I'm peaking right this second lower than I would typically, and as is everyone else. But going by the very, very vague description that the guy gave me on that live stream yesterday, it was like, well, I'm getting into the greens, or whatever colour it is, I'm colourblind, but I know which bit he meant. And I'm like, okay, so if you're getting well into the greens and you're a studio engineer, my psychology or my brain tells me that means as long as he's getting into them, he's nowhere near the top of them. So he's probably, a third to halfway up the greens. So I'm linking, just knowing what I know about him, reading between the lines a lot. That's where I think I should try and get the level to be, which will be a little bit quieter. In other words, this show should be a bit quieter than previous shows. Only a couple of dB. Probably, again, I'd be surprised if anybody noticed. But it is definitely going to be quieter. So all someone will do is just turn it up a little bit more, but given that most people will be hopping between videos and generally there's a bit of a level change when you do that, most people will be used to it, right? I hope.
People do subconsciously feel the difference though, Nathan.
again, Eli.
People do feel the difference. So you're right about that. People on a subconscious level may notice, even though they may not notice. To give that more context, uh, everyone else just think about how you've heard a demo and the difference in sound quality between a demo or a mixtape versus, a polished, mixed and mastered studio album. Sounds totally different. And when people play their music, they say, oh, it sounds good. It could be better. Usually they're talking about the sound because it doesn't feel like radio quality,
Right.
regardless of how good the content of the song is.
Exactly. And what I can notice it. I'm an advocate of keeping an eye on your YouTube stats if you're a YouTuber for obvious reasons, plus being in sales, stats was the thing that you kept up with. Anyway, since going to the extra mile with the sound, the view duration has increased. And I've seen it steadily going up as I perceive the quality of the sound to steady. Now, I know that's just a correlation I'm drawing. But nevertheless, when I think I'm not changing the backdrops, I'm not changing the scrolly bit with the text that imitates, a chat stream, but with something nondescript. I think it says UFO and some numbers or something. Nondescript radar when I do the intro. None of that's changed. And if it has, it's very, very subtle to the point where it's not going to make any difference to people's view duration. And the show itself hasn't changed that much, right? So over the period that I've been looking at that particular stat and watching it go up, I think, well, what have I actually been changing? Well, I've been paying a lot of attention to how good the show sounds. So therefore, view duration, if it sounds better, there's a good chance that people will stay tuned in longer just because the sound's less offensive. And that's what I'm going to say at this stage. I don't think I wouldn't say I'm at the sound where I can call it good yet. A stage where I can call the sound good. That's a lot of S's. But it's better than most. Most YouTubers' sound is horrendous, in my opinion. It's from bad to terrible in a lot of YouTubers' instances. Even the good ones, the ones that have got million-plus subscribers, they do it in really echoey rooms, and it really bugs me. It's like you've got enough money coming in from your YouTube channel to just go out and buy a couple of grand's worth of acoustic treatment. I know, obviously, that's what I'm doing, so I think everyone should do what I'm doing. I'm no different to any other person who thinks everyone should do what I'm doing. But you know what I'm getting at. If you've got that particular trade, i.e. you're a YouTuber, surely you should pay reasonably close attention to the sound. And when you listen back to your own videos, if you don't notice that it's echoing to all hell and your speech intelligibility is maybe 50 to 60%, you're like, if you can only hear 6 out of 10 words, then surely you should recognise that and want to do something about it. But there we go. Even with my pittance of an income, I still want it to all go back into making the show sound better.
At what point does the human ear no longer recognize the difference?
Never. Unless you're deaf. That was one of the things I used to say when I was in hi-fi sales. So when people would ask me that exact question pretty much verbatim, I'd say, well, there is no point. If you can hear, then you can hear a difference. You know, your hearing is fantastic. Most people, even if they've lost a lot of the range of hearing, what they can hear, you know, in that range, which might be limited, will be as good as it ever was. You know, you can either hear in that range or you can't, unless you're deaf.
What?
But just think about the times that you've been, you know, you're falling asleep and you hear a noise outside, and even though you're in a sealed room, you know, the windows are closed, even though you hear the noise as you're not even thinking about it, almost instantaneously you can pinpoint precisely where that sound came from, outside of the room you're in.
Well, that's interesting because, like, frame rates, you know, after you get over, 120, the human eye can't tell a difference. I think, is it 120?
Well, it depends who you ask. So the motion that you get on a 25 frame per second film at a cinema, you're not going to be able to distinguish the individual pictures in that. However, you do get a certain amount of sort of 80s motion blur, which in many films is actually preferable to the the crappier looking photography that you get in higher resolution, because it doesn't suspend disbelief as well, in my opinion. The lower frame rates actually make the fast action scenes look better for being a little bit more motion blurry. Whereas when you've got a really sharp, high fidelity, high resolution, 8K cameras that they're using, it's almost too much. The definition's too good, and you can spot that it's a set piece. So in modern films, I often go, I kind of, you lose the, it's Spider-Man doing this. You're like, that's Spider-Man doing a set piece on a wire. Now, don't get me wrong, I trained in that, so I know what that looks like. But moreover, when I was training in it, I still watch films, and never once did I go, oh yeah, that's the thing I'm learning how to do in college right now. You just suspended disbelief because it was good. But like I say, back then you had much lower frame rates than you do now. God, this is a very techie day. I'm very happy having this conversation. Sound and... I only took advantage because Righteous Force was talking about Christianity. So I thought, sod it, I'll talk about sound.
Those TVs are horrible. Sorry.
Go on, Eli.
No, I'm just saying, I've always hated the TVs where it looks like the news channel treatment versus like an actual movie. I can't really explain it other than...
No, I know what you mean. Over contrasted, pinpoint sharpness, just overly... Yeah, it's not nice. I know what you mean. Not natural either. Yeah, high def, but you don't see in super sharp, really bright high def. That's just not how the world looks, in my opinion.
Right.
Well, I was going to say, NASA takes the same advice when it puts out, like, what is it, the real crappy video imagery, like for the really unbelievable shots. They use crap. The harder it is to believe, the crappier their camera they use, So they probably understand that principle as good as anyone.
Maybe. In terms of resolution, though, when they were filming on film, it was infinite resolution. It's not like the old low frame rate wasn't good quality, because it was. It was exceptionally good quality, in fact, better than digitization. It's just film, right? It's just a photo. So the resolution's limited only by the quality of the lenses, and that's it. I mean, the film stock obviously as well, but you know what I mean. All things being equal, you're really only limited by the production quality. In other words, how good the person is operating the equipment and how good the equipment is. If you've got somebody who's a dab hand at getting it looking good, the resolution is inconsequential, because it's not making it up of pixels. It's taking multiple photographs.
Another thing that you're limited by.
Go on.
The Rayleigh criterion.
Yeah, the lens, that's true for everything, though. That digital or normal lenses with film running through them is still the same limitation to the lens applies in both instances. You've both got a lens doing something, right? So the Rayleigh criterion is going to be true regardless of the resolution. If you've got a 4K sensor or an 8K sensor, it's like, well, no, you're still limited by the lens and the aperture.
I bring that up because over the weekend I've been trying to figure out this Rayleigh criterion, like where the numbers come from and how they came about it. So I'm interested to ask you some questions about it.
That's good, but why?
Because somehow the formula has the 1.22 in it, and it also matches up with where they claim the Earth curve begins.
So, in other words, because they've hijacked perspective.
Yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing to me is that the 1.22 miles is the same as the formula's 1.22, but that 1.22 isn't 1.22 miles. It's just the ratio. So how did they line up the miles with the ratio is what I'm wondering.
That's a question for Adam when he next gets here in terms of how they've hijacked it. But what they've done is taken the effect that we see called perspective and called it Earth curve. The fact that those two numbers match might even be a coincidence, but I doubt it. But that's not for me to explain because I'm not a mathematician. Adam, on the other hand, is a keen mathematician and could probably explain it in a few sentences.
I was thinking maybe they designed
You're roboting. Can you drop and rejoin? Your audio's gone all horrible. It was on the edge earlier. When he comes back, if someone can just hustle him off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
So I'm speculating is that they actually designed the mile around the visual limitations of the eye.
I don't think it's that complicated. I don't think they designed it as much as, they had a philosophy that told them that only physical things exist. They assumed the horizon was physical, and then they back engineered it from that premise.
Yeah, bottom line, you need a physical horizon, hence Black Swan. But it's in terms of discussion, that was the bulk of the earlier parts of the debate. Once it got into full swing and we had sides set and a bit of order, that's what we got into debating. Looking at the curve calculator, looking how they're taking the horizon to be a physical edge and how much it's blocking things by. And then after a time, we figured out what was actually going on is they're hijacking an effect that we see in reality perspective. Take that out of their equations, put it side view so that you can justify why there's no perspective or angular size change. Ascribe feet and inches values to the target so that they don't change with distance, they stay the same. And Bob's your uncle, you've taken the effect called perspective and called it Earth curve, by way of a reified physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon that blocks things and gives you the value for how much things are blocked by. Feet and inches missing at the bottom because of physical obstruction called a horizon, Earth curve in their case. It's not, the horizon isn't an Earth curve, but they have indeed hijacked perspective and called it Earth curve.
But you know what I'm saying? It's at 1.22 miles is where they hijack perspective. But if you convert that to kilometers, it's 1.96 kilometers. So that doesn't match the Rayleigh criterion ratio there, 1.22, right? So how is it that it matches? That's what is racking my brain.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I've not sit and figured out how they back-engineered perspective and turned that into Earth curve. We see the predecessor with the Rayleigh criterion and the Muppet Vision version without perspective in the form of the Earth curve calculator. Like I say, if Adam comes in today, I will, prod you to ask him.
Nathan, isn't he just using a different convention? When we use nautical miles or statute miles, it's just a different convention. The distance is the same.
Sure.
That's what I was going to say.
Maybe. I don't know the answer to that question, but got to start a live show, so. Welcome to the Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected. And if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, we are joined by 10th Man, Refracted Curvature, Brian's Logic, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Good morning.
Morning, Nathan.
Hello.
Morning, Kevin.
Hi-oh.
Hey, Eli. One more.
Morning.
Truth Seeker, enthusiasm level at 30% Discord. Excellent. Just what I'd like to see. Any evidence of a physical, geometric, sphere-edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curve, and is actually the hijacking of perspective? Any evidence?
Ships disappear at 1.22 miles from the bottom up.
Well, technically there can't be evidence because the horizon is an optical location that changes with weather and elevation. So if the horizon is just an optical place that moves closer and further from you and can do within an hour, then there is no way it's impossible to get evidence for what you're asking.
Indeed. We only have one horizon, and the horizon in the Begging the Question Proof of Nothing Perspective Hijacking Earth Curve Calculator was geometric and physical. The horizon in reality is a not actual location. The apparent, meaning not actual, location where the sky appears, redundant, to meet the ground. It's not somewhere you can stick a postcode. It's not a limitation to your view at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That assertion has been debunked by the Black Swan. We have shown that the horizon is beyond the limitations of an Earth sphere radius 3959. The horizon is not Earth curve. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
No, because even within the heliocentric model, even within the claim that the air moves in lockstep with a rotating globe Earth, airplanes flying from commercial aircraft flying from North Carolina to Los Angeles would still only take an hour and a half because they have to fly through the air to get there. So, no, there is no evidence of axial rotation.
Right. Globe Earth claims we will see a 15 degrees an hour drift as Earth turns underneath things that are unattached. This is claimed to be exhibited in things like footballs, as claimed by Neil deGrasse Tyson. That would be Earth turning underneath a football that leaves the ground for you to see it from the stand seem to drift through the goal. That's Coriolis deflection, a claim thereof. Claws claim to be globe Earth turning beneath the ball. If Earth turned underneath a football, as claimed by Neil deGrasse Tyson in this example, then Earth would also turn under blimps, drones, and aeroplanes. If Earth turned under an aeroplane, then a Charlotte, North Carolina to LA flight would only take an hour and a half, as Brian's pointing out, regardless of the anti-flat Earth rebuttal that Earth and atmosphere move together, negating the claimed Coriolis effect that we are supposed to see according to a globe Earth that turns underneath to cause Coriolis effect claim that we do not see. The rebuttal that we won't expect to see it flies in the face of a globe claim that we will from the anti-flat Earth side. We do not have reference frames to claim. We point out that the Coriolis effect we are supposed to see is not seen.
We also point out that there's no axial.
Go ahead, Refracted, and then Chaos afterwards. Go ahead, John.
We also point out that there's no R value to measure, so you can't have spin without a radius. No.
Makes me smile every time you say it. I've got to be honest, John.
Well, I mean, that's technically our position. The other two are their positions.
Right. So it goes from globe claims we'll see 15 degrees an hour drift to flat Earth has proved that there isn't any because we don't see any, to anti-flat Earthers say we wouldn't expect to see any of the globe's claim of Coriolis drift because it's moving together, and then you say you're going to need R for that. End of argument.
Well,
So
Technically,
isn't that
or
isn't that
without.
like
Hold on, Brian. Just chaos
putting
next.
a
Sorry.
ball
Start again, chaos. Sorry.
putting? Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Isn't that like putting a ball inside of a car and then sending the car 60 miles an hour forward and the ball rolls to the back of the van or the car?
No. So the Coriolis effect is only observable from a non-inertial turning reference frame. So you in a sealed car is the anti-flat Earth response when there's no drift to observe. The Coriolis effect is not actual. That is to say that on a roundabout, you've got 3 people. 2 aren't on it, 1 is. Now the 2 people not on the roundabout throw a ball back and forth to each other and back again. To each other, back again, over the top of the roundabout. That ball moves in a straight line. From the observer's position on the roundabout, he sees the ball seem to curve because he's turning beneath it. So it's the not actual drift in the ball as you turn beneath it on a roundabout. It's only describable from the roundabout. Yeah? That's how Coriolis effect is detailed. So for there to be a Coriolis effect, you must be observing something seem to drift as you turn beneath. Make sense? We don't see that effect on Earth.
Yep.
We're not turning beneath anything. If we did, it would shorten flight times. Any more chaos? Then go ahead, Brian.
No, that's it. I mean, the only reason why I was thinking about it is because, like, the van is the thing that's turning. So let's say the Earth, and the ball should be the thing that we see drifting, right? So as the van moves, the ball is drifting, even though it's in lockstep with the air inside the van. Or am I not understanding that right?
The van example isn't any good because you are in the same reference frame as the ball. So when you see it move, i.e. roll to the back of the car, that is actually rolling. It's actually taking that path. So if you turn left, yeah, and the ball did actually curve, then the ball is actually curving. Whereas what you're describing in Coriolis effect is the ball, like described, tossed over the top of a roundabout. It's always actually moving straight. So if I simplify it one step further, instead of a ball being thrown straight, have no motion at all. A tree limb observed from the roundabout will seem to come towards you if it's hanging over the top of the roundabout and you're spinning towards it. So it's the not actual effect of the branch coming towards you. It's not actually coming towards you, you're coming towards it. Likewise, if you make it slightly more complicated and have a ball tossed over the top, as you rotate beneath the ball tossed in a straight line, it looks like it's curving. It's just the looks like it's curving because you're turning beneath it. That's all Coriolis is. Something looking like it's doing something that it isn't because you're turning beneath it. So to have the effect on Earth, Earth must be turning beneath stuff to have the effect. And if we're turning beneath stuff, then we're turning beneath stuff. Drones, helicopters, hot air balloons, aeroplanes, balls when you throw them. Exactly as is claimed by Neil deGrasse Tyson. So that's the claim. We're supposed to be turning beneath stuff. Okay, so if we're supposed to be turning beneath stuff, we're supposed to be turning beneath aeroplanes. We're not. And then hear the anti-flat Earth cry, we wouldn't expect to see it drift at 15 degrees an hour, as the Globe claims. In other words, they go against their own claim and start convoluting it by describing how you in a train with a drone will work, when in reality it's the drone leaving an open-top train that's going in a circle, for the sake of argument, and you seeing the ball disappear as you throw it in the air. Well, in theoretical terms, the ball goes directly up above your zenith and then comes down again. But the zenith has changed. You've moved after it went up in the air. But from your vantage point on the train that's open top, you see the ball curve away from the train. Well, that's the not actual curved path that the ball takes when it's only gone up and down, because you've thrown it up. But as soon as you seal up the train, you're both in the same reference frame. Coriolis effect requires 2. That would be the reference frame of the ball travelling in a straight line between 2 people over a roundabout, and the reference frame of you on the roundabout. The non-inertial reference frame is the roundabout. non-inertial because it's an apparent effect that's being described. So you're not describing the inertia you experience, you're describing the inertia of the tree coming towards you. It seems like the tree's coming towards me at whatever rate I'm turning towards it. Well, that effect is the Coriolis force. And because you're describing it as a force, the force of the tree coming to get you, you're not going to be describing the inertia on the roundabout. You're describing the inertia, not actual, of the tree. Hence, your reference frame turning on the roundabout becomes the non-inertial reference frame. The frame of reference where you and what you are attached to are all, as far as you are concerned, stationary. You're not moving relative to the platform, and even if you are, you're only moving relative to the ground. It's not relative to the spin. Therefore, because you are spinning and essentially in a non-inertial frame of reference, not moving, the effect of you actually moving, even though you're going to be detailing a not actual apparent effect, is the tree coming towards you. So it's, oh my God, the Coriolis force. The tree's coming to get me. And someone knocks you on your shoulder and goes, no, it's actually the roundabout that's turning. The tree's not moving a smegging inch. We're moving towards it. So for this effect to happen, we would be on a turning Earth turning towards your drone when you launch it. So you launch your drone and suddenly you smack into it without you moving the sticks. Why? Well, because it's claimed Earth's turning beneath the drone. Well, that never happens. That's what we point out. Roll on, as I said earlier, the anti-flat earthers, you're not expecting to see 15 degrees an hour Coriolis effect. We wouldn't expect to see drift. The drift that the globe claims proves it spins. Any more on Coriolis? If not, we're moving on to the sun.
Yeah, I have.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, well, I mean, the Coriolis effect, as you know, I never use the word force because I totally disagree with it being called a pseudo force. But the Coriolis effect is just a visual effect. So it's no different than you being in a car, seeing a signpost come towards you at 40 miles an hour, but it's because the car is driving at 40 miles an hour.
Yes.
It's the same thing, just in a circular fashion. It's no different than that.
Precisely. Exactly. You're in a car, if you want to detail it from a sealed car. Yeah, it's the effect of the signs on the motorway looking like they're coming towards you. Now, they're fixed into the ground, and it's the not actual effect of that sign coming towards you that's a force when described that way. The force of the sign that's concreted into the ground coming towards you. No. In reality, you're moving towards it. And it's that not actual deflection of the sign. It's deflecting, getting bigger and getting closer as it comes towards you with the Coriolis force, that concreted into the ground sign that isn't actually moving. But it is, it's got Coriolis force, right? Yeah, that's you going towards it. Any more on this?
One other thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go on, Brian, and then John.
It would work better if John responds after this, because it's about what John says about the R value as far as axial rotation goes. We don't need to know an R value to know that we're moving and something else is not above us, if you understand what I mean. So we don't need to know an R value to, like, we could state we're moving at 15 degrees an hour because the sun moves at 15 degrees an hour. But that doesn't give it, let's say, a miles, a size over a course of a day of a circle of miles. It just gives it degrees. So we could not know a radius, but still be able to make a claim that we're moving at 15 degrees an hour.
Not quite true.
We can...
Not quite true. As soon as you ascribe that 15 degrees an hour, then you can only calculate it out to the circumferential value and radius value thereafter that is ascribed to globe Earth. That has to be the case. Now you're saying, well, you just haven't calculated it at that point, but you're making the assertion when you say that Earth is spherical, turning at 15 degrees an hour because you see the sun moving at 15 degrees an hour, at which point you absolutely do need an R value. The fact that you haven't calculated, you just made the presupposition it's Earth turning, not the sun, doesn't mean that doesn't give you a spherical surface that absolutely, without doubt, requires an R value to make the assertion, with any validity at least.
Well, I don't think so, because 15 degrees an hour is a degree movement. It doesn't state a speed, so it doesn't give you a size. So you don't need to know the radius to know that you're moving at 15 degrees an hour.
No, you don't need to. No,
because
I agree. You don't need to.
Even if
But at that point, it does tie it down to an absolute size with an absolute R value. Once you make that assertion, you don't have to calculate it out. You can just make the begging the question assertion that Earth's turning at 15 degrees an hour. But there are certain mathematical consequences that follow, and the R value is one of them.
I leave John go ahead. I'm not quite. I leave John go ahead. I might say something after him.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I think I got a better example than Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the football going through the goalposts. What about when they claim they send rockets into the second law of thermodynamics violation space vacuum? Doesn't the rocket go straight up, but it appears to go to the horizon because we're turning beneath it? Isn't that the accepted claim? If you wouldn't expect to see deviation.
I can't remember if that's the exact claim. If there's any ballers, are there any ballers in Discord? Because if there are, without being held to task on your Fundy Sky belief, does anybody know the answer to this question? Is it claimed that you will see a not actual deflection from the ground as a rocket takes off? Is that the claim? Because I don't know that's the case. That might be a second-hand anti-flat Earth or Joe Normie who doesn't understand their actual claim, rather than an official NASA claim.
That. Yeah, I've heard
pretty
that.
sure that
Remember when the
Hold on, just one sec, John.
Yeah, remember when the
Hold on one sec, John. Go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, before flat Earth was a thing, that's what I thought. That the rockets appear to have a tail that's curving because of the spin of the.
No, sure, I appreciate that, Eli. But while my brain goes to that also, I hesitate to say that is the official line because I don't know that's the official line. So if anybody does know what the official line, do we experience Coriolis deflection? That is to say, a curved path in a straight travelling rocket because we're turning beneath it. Is that the official line? Now, it should be because Coriolis effect is very much the official line of globe Earth. Therefore, if you're going to have an orbital motion and a transition, even if they're going to use I'm going to claim Earth spinning with the atmosphere, at some point they transition to orbital motion, according to their Fundy R belief and their orbital mechanics that they beg the question of when they send up penises into the sky. Either way, they've got to have some transition stage where Earth's turning beneath the rocket. But where is that claim? Is it claimed that Coriolis effect is observed the moment the thing takes off? Is it not discussed? If not, why not? You know, this is quite an interesting... Who brought up this? Who asked?
I know the
John
answer.
did.
Good
I had a
point, John.
baller tell me that when.
Hold on,
well,
Neil.
just
Just
bring it
let
up.
John
Do you
respond.
remember there was a video where a kid seen a rocket take off and it went in a parabolic arc, an apparent parabolic arc according to his parents, because the Earth was turning, and that's why the rocket disappeared into the
I love
horizon.
that video.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
I
got...
was going to say the same thing. I was told by ballers, just shoot up fireworks. When you shoot those rockets, they're not going straight up because the Earth is turning. That's why they're curving.
Sure. But that's ballers. And
Yeah,
some
but
video of some guy telling his son that, which I've also used as an example of, parental brainwashing. But ultimately, it doesn't establish the official position in this regard. And I'll say it the third and last time, and then I'll move on. It would be nice to know the official position in regards to Coriolis effect when it comes to rockets. We don't know the official position. We know they're not visiting a sky vacuum, so let's ask about that next. Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without a container? Go ahead, Eli.
No, there is no evidence that you can have gas pressure without a container.
Can I also say no to that? And good morning, everybody.
Hey, Chocolate.
Hey, Chocolate.
You.
Yeah, electrostatic pressure, a barometer.
Barometer doesn't measure electrostatic pressure.
What? Barometer?
No. Electrostatic pressure without a container.
What's electrostatic pressure?
Did you just say pressure?
Hold on. What's electrostatic pressure?
Electrostatic, that's where all the molecules stick together with electric, and you can measure the pressure without a container.
But an electrostatic force isn't gas. Might involve gas, but it's not gas. the force you're describing is, well, it's electrostatic.
Yeah, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate because I had somebody, Zanuck, tell me that we could have gas pressure with electrostatics, even though he said pressure, and you still need a container to register the pressure.
Isn't that the point? Good old Zanuck, he's still at it, huh?
Jay or Payne?
Could I say something about the container? Now that Zanuck's name is brought into it, we can throw that claim away immediately. The container, I have ballers saying to me, right, stupidly, if gas doesn't have weight, how come when you put it into a container, it adds weight to the container? What it's doing is adding density to the overall density, adding to the overall density of the container. But it doesn't have a singular downward vector. The thing about gas in the container, although it's slightly off the point of the question, but the thing about gas in the container, when I release gas from a container, it will go on all vectors. It won't just go only down, right, debunking all claims of a force of gravity. And it won't just go only up, debunking all claims of a sky vacuum. So,
For the output of air, like if you orient the valve down, up, any direction, the output of the air pressure will still be the same.
Yeah, inside the container before your
That's
example
just a
begins.
guess, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly, Eli. Before your example even begins, their assertion is to say once you add an increased amount of pressure to a container, therefore you've got gas go down, go boom, boom, more weight. No, the container itself you can weigh and see that you've put an increased amount of stuff into that containment, making the container weigh more. However, inside the container, the gas, which is then just at a higher pressure, is still expanding or trying to escape. In other words, it's at a higher pressure and pressing equally on all sides of the container in all directions. It's not settling at the bottom with weight. You're just forcing more stuff into a solid container so you can then arbitrarily apply your downward vector to it. Meanwhile, the gas inside that container is at a higher pressure. It's the wrong convention to describe it with weight because there's gas that's going up. So what are you going to do? Chuck a scale in there and go, look, there's more stuff pressing down. Oh yeah, well there's also more stuff pressing up. Are they not included in your weight? Well, it doesn't work like that, does it, when there's stuff that's going in the opposite direction?
Hey, I have a correction for what I said
We
a
tried
moment
to
ago.
explain that to him, but he kept on calling us, names because he was trying to say that the weight is pushing down, which would cause a scale to read, and it was just, I don't know, it was hilarious. He was really, really funny guy. First time I ever talked to him.
Objects weigh more in a vacuum. Throw that one at him, and all he'll come up with is buoyancy. Buoyancy will be a displacement up the way. So he's claiming the air would displace up the way. So if objects weigh more in a vacuum, it means there is no such thing as a force of gravity adding weight to air.
Moving on. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
I have a correction for what I said earlier, but I looked it up. They actually claim that its orbital mechanics is the reason the rocket moves in a parabolic arc.
Yeah, I knew that bit. That bit I knew. I knew that was their official rhetoric because it's going in an orbit. But at some point there's a transition stage, right? So if you're saying, well, their explanation for the curved trajectory is that it's in an orbital path, fine. Yeah, once it leaves whatever boundary layer they're going to assert, then it can reach orbital motion in their begging the question sphere Earth that hasn't got an hour value and takes place in the second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum. But there's a transition point, isn't there? Yeah? If that rhetoric relies upon, well, Earth and atmosphere move together, so no Neil deGrasse Tyson Coriolis effect then. Or, no, Earth will immediately start turning underneath at whatever rate, miles per hour, you've got that latitude. Okay? Well, if that's the case, then you've got a 15 degrees an hour turn of the Earth underneath the rocket as soon as it leaves the ground. Therefore, that's in line with the globe Earth claim of Coriolis deflection. So we just need to know where, after it leaves the ground, they stand in terms of whether or not it'll display Coriolis effect, because it goes without saying that it's going to be in an orbit once it gets to wherever they're claiming it is, which is a fake place called space.
Well, just before we move on to the sun question, it has to be their claim.
Correct.
It's not as if whether it is or isn't. It has to be.
That's correct. That's correct. No matter exactly. That's why I'm saying no matter what any normie says in terms of, well, yeah, Earth's turning underneath. It's like, yeah, okay. The official globe claim is that there is Coriolis effect. That is the claim. That would be a 15 degrees an hour drift as Earth turns beneath the rocket. That is the official globe claim. But is there anywhere where NASA state it officially, as opposed to the official globe claim is, and therefore Brian is absolutely correct. They can't not be claiming that. That's fact.
It'd be akin to us claiming that the Earth is not flat, but also flat. If they're claiming a rotating Earth, then that has to be their claim.
I showed those to my wife. She couldn't quite believe her eyes. So I detailed it. I was like, on Taboo Conspiracy, if you want to check this out, it's on one of his flat Earth / globe debunking. He's got a list of about 20 things, maybe a bit less, 16 or something like that. Anyway, one of them has got just a great big stream of NASA documents where they just detail how the equations and maths and whatever it is they're doing in the description requires Earth to be flat and stationary. And it's disclaimed by NASA over and over and over and over and over. And I'm just showing her all these documents, and I watched her eyes and they'd fall out of her head. It was really funny. Anyway.
There's a guy who was on Globebusters. I don't know how legit the guy is, but he claims to be a master gunner. And he was showing some tables for range tables and stuff like that. And he was laying out the difference between the handbooks, like for snipers, and tables for gunnery and stuff like that. How there's standard and non-standard. The non-standard includes a Coriolis force, right? This nonsense. But nobody ever uses them. You only ever use the standard, where there is no Coriolis effect, or what they're calling force, included.
Yeah, because in reality, it's not experience. That's what we point out, and it's just left to the anti-flat Earths to defend how we don't have it and why we don't have it. You wouldn't expect to see drift. And no, I don't expect to see anything. I'm not claiming it. The globe does. So you're telling us that we're not expecting to see it doesn't sit in line with NASA. Their official documentation has, how did you describe it, standard forms that explain that you take Earth to be flat and stationary. Now, they've also got a non-standard version that includes your fundy beliefs that Earth's a sphere and you've got Coriolis effect and we're spinning and all that shite. But that's non-standard, because Earth isn't any of those things. Earth's flat and stationary, as it must be navigated and negotiated.
They don't like to...
Well, you can drive your car. Sorry.
They don't like to tie their... It's all right, I'm on Discord. They don't like to tie their belief in the globe to the claims that people have made about the globe. The people who say that this is a fact, that we live on this globe. Like they'll say, like for instance, a guy said the horizon is as far as you can see out into the distance where the water meets the, and I'm like, yeah, but not for a globe though, because on a globe it's actually 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height as a consequence of the geometric shape that you think you live on. Very distinct difference.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
We never
That's
did the distance to the sun.
ridiculous.
My bad. Sorry, Chocolate.
Sorry, Brian.
I was just reminding Nathan that we didn't do the distance to the sun, but sorry.
I said it. No one answered, right? Surely I said it.
You said it, but then we got taken backwards, back to the other Coriolis point.
That's
And
pretty-
then
What is the sun
interrupted this.
anyway?
It's important, so let's ask it again. Any evidence of the distance to the sun? We'll come back to molten iron cores now.
What
That
is
hasn't
the
got
sun?
answered. Thanks, Brian.
What is it?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? You've been doing flat Earth debate for over 6 years. You don't know what the sun is yet?
What? Well, my question is this: what is the supposed evidence for the distance to the sun?
It's just an extrapolation based on R.
We don't
I
have
mean, for
any
the
R
new
value.
for the new listener, what does that mean?
The R value, Earth
Can you give us a
radius,
little
is
more?
going to give you your distance to the sun.
Yeah, the black swan debunks the claim two-way speed of light, because that's all. It all starts with a radius. All starts with the radius, and an orbit, stuff like that.
Orbit being another assumption. Let's cover it right now. Any evidence of R? Earth radius.
Negative.
Nope.
That means no gravity either, because you need a radius for gravity, right?
Look, you're bringing on too many questions too soon. Let's cover molten iron core. We've got through the sun. We'll plough through this together. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Stupidest thing I've ever heard.
That was where we got last
So
time.
technically,
Any advancements on it's stupid?
Well, yeah, because technically it's a reverse dynamo. Because a dynamo works by magnetic creating electric, whereas the Glober claim is there's electric creating magnetic. That's the actual claim. You know, a moving electric field charge can create a magnetic field, but you need the magnetic field to create the electric charge. If you know what I mean. Like that's how a dynamo works. It's magnetic field creates electric charge. You know, a dynamo on a bike, you put a light on your bike. But their claim is the opposite. It's electric charge creates a magnetic field. So where is the electric charge coming from? But it don't matter. There's all nonsense on it. And just throw that out there.
There's a reason it's self-perpetuating molten iron core in the title, or in the question, I should say. So yeah, it's a good point. Right, you ready, Neil? Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Negative.
Any valid description of gravity would be great to start with.
And you need a radius value for that as well.
No, this normally triggers
John.
somebody. Go ahead, Brian.
I was just saying John is correct when he says there's no valid description, because you can't define gravity. You'd have to know. How can you define something you can't harness? Or, you know what I mean? How do you define something? You can't see it. It's just a claim. It's just a claim. That's all it is. Gravity is simply no more than just a random claim.
It's a word, like abracadabra is a word. You just say it and magical stuff happens. That's it.
Or a la peanut butter sandwiches.
That's one of my, again,
Or that.
wife getting 2 mentions in one show. So one of her favourite lines that obviously lets me know that she pays a reasonable amount of attention to the show is you can think of it as a. So if something's not got done, well, you can think of it as being done. She uses that line all the time. She quotes Musa. She probably doesn't even know who it is that's saying it. She knows the context it was in originally, but she'll often chuckle along and say, well, you can think of it as having been done, or you know, whatever is imagination land explanation rather than the reality of it not happening. Well, you can think of it as a force. Gravity, that is.
Well, if you never define your terms, it's just as reasonable to say that the Snarflegurp in Jajabor is responsible for the Hoopadanoots. You know, that's basically what they're. I mean, that's what they're. If they never define their terms.
Go on, Brian.
If they never define their terms. But yeah,
I mean,
if they
that
never
sounds
define
about
their
right.
terms, they're just saying nonsense if they don't define their terms.
you know how they feel about the definitions of words.
Words have no meaning to them.
No, the definitions of words are meaningless. That's great.
Yeah,
So
it's
if the
just
What does the
definitions
word
are
meaningless
meaningless,
mean?
then words have no meaning.
it's just semantics.
Yeah. What does the word meaningless mean?
It's just
You know what I mean?
semantics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you ever
The word they're using.
think that they'd get to this point where they would say things like this, like definitions of words are meaningless, and you know, ask us for citations for claims that they claim are visible, and ask us why we claim that these things are visible?
No, and I think we're all
Why would
shocked
we
when they
expect
say
to
it.
see things that they claim that we expect to see? Like, what the hell? Did you ever think that they would get to this point? Because this is crazy.
I remember
Where
when I
are
was
they?
just
Where are the Globers?
I remember when I was just listening, these things are shocking to me when they would come out with stuff like that. I'd be like, you gotta be kidding me. Are they serious?
I'll tell you what, Chocolate, they're too quickly embarrassed now. Nobody wants to come here and be embarrassed.
No, that's not the reason. Nathan shows me and boycotted. Come on. You know the reason why.
I don't doubt that, but you know, it's because they're being embarrassed. It's not because they're any legitimate reason.
No, that's the real reason. They claim
But
they're boycotting the show.
Any more on this? Any more on gravity? If not,
Yeah, the word, well, I do have something to say about gravity, but just want to say the word meaningless in that context has no meaning. Because
Exactly.
words don't have anything. Yeah, just on gravity. Yeah, if a force of gravity was real, let's say a force pre-1915 was real, then objects would weigh less in a vacuum, but they don't, they weigh more. So that's the end of that. That's the end of their pressure gradient claim. You know, that's the end of all claims involving a force of gravity. There is no such thing as a force of gravity giving weight to anything.
Well, a good baller would say that gravity's not a force at that point.
alrighty
But I
then.
wouldn't help them out.
What use is it for anything then?
It's magic.
Well, all you got to do is convolute mass, energy. Don't ever define them. Just let people think of whatever they want to think of it as meaning, so that you know, then it's in their minds. That's the only place that it can exist.
I see. Can I think of it as a force? Hang on, I'll just ask George Musa.
While shaving.
You know, on Friday I was playing pool, billiards, and you know, we had this crazy shot, and the balls landed so close to each other, and there was probably, I don't know, I'd say about half-inch gap. And we actually ended up putting the game on pause to go light a fire and, you know, have a couple brews by the fire. And when we came back to the game, the balls were still half an inch there. It separated. I think of that as like the Cavendish, where, you know, mass attracts mass. But those balls were there the entire time and didn't move at all. No attraction.
You didn't do it
Alrighty.
right, that's why.
Yeah, mass doesn't attract mass.
What's mass?
Yeah. Also, mass is another one of those terms just described by John as being kept convoluted, allowed to be described in your mind as whatever you like. So yeah, what's mass?
Well, it has a history, doesn't it? It has a pre-Einstein and post-Einstein description. Pre-Einstein is that mass is weightless unless given weight by a force of gravity. And post-Einstein is mass is a quantitative measure of inertia. Two completely different things, if you look at them correctly.
According to Google, mass, a coherent typically large body of matter with no definite shape. A mass of curly hair. Wow, that sums it up.
Yeah, they either describe it as an amount of stuff which is mole, or its resistance to acceleration, which is inertia. Which is, correct me if I'm wrong, an equivocation fallacy, when you've got one word with two definitions, two meanings. So there we'll equivocate between these two different definitions of this single word mass. So any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics.
Not yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't be waiting for it. It's not possible for it to happen. If they are to use scientific method, then there can't be ever.
As long as there's heliocentrists in charge of those fields, it'll never happen anyway. But I can guarantee that.
Well, they can't manipulate their effect. They're dependent variable. They can't, they can't manipulate what they claim to be the cause of the effect. So they can't cause the effect. They can only make a claim about it. So they can't ever have a viable hypothesis.
Well, they can't ever describe it correctly either, because if they did, they'd have to use a flat Earth as part of their description, and that'll never happen.
That's prehistoric science you're talking about. There's a new science now. Observe and declare.
That's not science. Are we done? Is that the end of housekeeping? If so, 10th, are you there?
Yes.
Can you look up a Bible verse?
Give me the verse and give me a minute. I'm posting something. Yes.
Psalm 68:4.
Psalm 68:4. All right.
So this is I've been e-begging people to help me pay a bill that still hasn't come, and I'm definitely not going to chase it till at least payday. But there we go. My projector's in for repair, and as a result, I know I'm going to get a bill that I just don't have the money to cover. So I've been saying, please smash the PayPal link, help me out. Hopefully, I won't have to run a GoFundMe if a few people give me money on PayPal, and a couple of people have, to their credit, given me money on PayPal. One of them was like, "Here's this money to help you out because you've been e-begging like mad. However, your task as a result of me giving you this money is to read out this verse." Now, I'm not going to butcher reading out a verse. I'm going to ask 10th Man to do it, but that's good enough. It's going to get read out on the show, on the live show. So I'm not going to mention my bad for interrupting the beginning of your sentence there, Neil. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, you gave it to 10th. I'm just saying I know it by heart, so I'm waiting for him.
Oh, well, no, if you know it by heart, I'm glad you interrupted. I will take it back. My bad, Neil. If you know it by heart, if you can, yeah, go ahead.
Sing unto God, sing praises to his name, extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name, Jah, and rejoice before him.
Epic. Well, thank you very much. Mission accomplished. I'm not going to read out his name.
One of our songs in choir.
Fair enough.
Good job, Neil.
Would you like to explain the sentiment, Neil?
By his name, Jah. Well, it's just...
Excellent. Thank you for explaining it.
How'd you like my ventriloquist?
Are you trying to say I'm a dummy?
No. Good job.
Other than giving praise to God, what I don't understand the sentiment. Maybe I'm missing something obvious.
Well, he rides upon the heavens. They're trying to say he rides upon the heavens. Right? Flat Earth debate. The heavens.
No, I'm still not following. Nope, it's not going to get broken down for me, but I appreciate that it's got read out on the show as I was specifically asked for that. I'm glad I remembered, because it's not the kind of thing I'd remember. Although, that said, I did get money, so yeah, I probably would have remembered. Smash the PayPal link, people.
You know, the feeling you get when you look up now as a flat earther and see the wonder that is the sky. You know, just the amazing feat of creation. I think it's talking about that.
Oh, I like that a lot. That's something I've done consistently throughout my life. Before Flat Earth, during and after. Looking up. Now it's even better because I've got kids, so I can share it with them and see them seeing it for the first time. So recently I went on a holiday and we were in the woods, but it was very clear, low light pollution, and you could look up and see the amazing stars through the trees. And just seeing the look in my kids' eyes as they were staring at, in some cases, seeing the reflection of the stars in their little eyeballs, it was amazing. But that's something that I held a lot of joy in doing. And again, even when I was a baller, I'd look up and go, I wonder what it is. Maybe that's why I'm a flat earther. I always questioned with their explanations for it to a certain level. I know Chocolate's got similar stories about his past in terms of you're shaking your head whilst maybe doing the same thing, looking up at the stars and going, yeah, I wonder what they are. Because even in their paradigm, right, they're so far, they don't really know. But anyway.
What my girlfriend the other day. There was some video playing on YouTube, and a quick clip was a time lapse of the star. And she said, "See, ever since you messed my head up with this flat Earth BS, uh, everything like the star trails don't even look real." But it was the star trails. So I was thinking, why? Because you see it the way they look, meaning like they all seem to be mechanical. Well, maybe not. They seem like they're moving in lockstep. It doesn't seem like what you would imagine. That's right. That's right. It is a machine up there. It does look like that. You guys know what I'm talking about. The sky looks like it's spinning like a carousel.
Yep.
Sure. When you've got a heliocentric idea of the motion and then you see a star trail video, you go, hang on a second. Aren't we supposed to be whirling around the sun, which is whirling around the great attractor? Shouldn't there be a lot more motion in these stars? What's going on? Why is it just a perfect spiral with the odd minor exception?
I think Eli, what your girlfriend was saying to you, without realizing it. I know you know, but I think what Eli was detailing there is, I think what his girlfriend was saying to him was, reality doesn't look like what I believe or was told to believe.
Right.
This is not what
Yes.
See, that is what I
Absolutely.
perceived Elon Musk to be saying when he said, it's real because it looks so fake. So when you look at things like through the eye of your girlfriend, Eli, the star trails not making any sense in a heliocentric model, she then literally described them as looking fake, right? That is, as I say, the sentiment I took from Elon, or maybe the sentiment he meant to imply when he said that, trying to be clever. Knows damn well it's fake. It's going to a sky vacuum, lying bastard. But anyway, that was the sentiment he was hoping to imply. Lying bastard.
Well, since around the year 2000, the world and people who've grown up in it, let's say people who were young in the late 90s and grew up through the past 21 years, went to school and college and university and whatever, and they're in their early 20s. Like, basically, they've been shown computer-generated space for all that time. Like, before that time, they had a dodgy video that was supposed to be on the side of rockets and things of the sky vacuum that NASA would give it. But the generation that is now in their early 20s, all they've seen is CGI space. So I'm not pointing at Eli's girlfriend when I'm saying this, because I obviously don't know the lady. But when you show them reality, it's like, this is not what the CGI looks like. Reality must be wrong because the CGI is what we were shown it to be. Not going to way. It's like we were shown one thing, but reality is not fitting it.
Right, exactly. So, to give it a more grounded comparison, if, let's say you're watching Aquaman or something like that, something that takes place in a kind of underwater setting, And what you see it as is kind of like the little bubbles, and everyone you can see. You've still got a horizon. You can see the people in the distance around the rocks underwater in the corner. And then you cut to somebody who goes under the water, and it's just basically black. There's just very little to see. You know what I mean? For whatever reason, there's just not a lot to see. And someone looks at that and goes, that's not like I imagined it. Well, if that person was polluted with the idea that that CGI representation in Aquaman was actually how it looks underwater, then you're going to think that that's how it looks. And when you see something that isn't like that, that becomes the non-reality, even though that's actual footage. But that's the reality we're in terms of the millennials. And you're right, that's all they've been exposed to. High quality CGI at the cutting edge of cinematography. That's what NASA are. They always have been. They're not cutting edge in terms of space travel, they're cutting edge in terms of cinematography. And if that's your reality, when you see something different, you go, oh, that makes sense.
See, the realization happened in maybe about 2015, and you know it because of the reaction of the naysayers. And what I'm talking about is high altitude balloon footage. I didn't think it looked like that. Most people didn't think. When I showed my girlfriend that, she's like, "What's this?" And I was like, "That's a high altitude balloon." She's like, "That looks crazy," and I was like, "Yeah, I know." Like, and this is why. Like, if everyone didn't have the reaction of "That's not what I expected it to look like," then Neil deGrasse Tyson's sentiment about it looking flat from the eye uh, from the from the Felix Baumgartner jump, that would have never been shared. Okay, we wouldn't have all of these anti-flat earthers trying to say, well, yeah, it looks like it's, you can if you count the pixels, and you can see that it's like all of this weird stuff when it just doesn't look like what we all expected. So you either have these explanations for why we shouldn't believe our lying eyes, or you have Neil deGrasse Tyson straight up saying, "Yeah, no, it's flat as far as you can see, bro."
That I could do a whole show on that 1.5, 2 minute piece from Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's probably less than that. It's probably 30 seconds worth. I could probably do a whole hour show on that one little magic trick. You know, if the paradigm does change, and the Western world becomes aware that they're actually on a stationary flat plane as opposed to the lies of space and sky vacuums and sphere Earth and orbits and all the other nonsense, if that ever happens, that particular magic trick by Neil deGrasse Tyson will go down in history as the best magic trick he's pulled off to date. It's exceptional. It's so multi-layered, very clever. It's, you know, I'm not a deGrasse Tyson fan, but in terms of magic tricks, in terms of complexity and working for multiple different types of people at multiple different types of levels, it's excellent. It's just a superb magic trick. That stuff is flat, slap, slap, slap on the beach ball shaped like a globe. That's a fantastic magic trick. You know, it's things like, in some ways, the heliocentric model itself is you know, majestic to behold in many ways. You know, I'm not going to deny the complexity of the heliocentric model, and there's a lot of admiration that you can behold for it, even if you're not under the misapprehension that that's reified into the Earth you're standing on, because it isn't. Doesn't mean you can't go out. It's still pretty cool, right? And it is. However, there's certain things from our opponent's side, in this case globe believers, not anti-flat earthers like deGrasse Tyson, that you can go, man, it's a complex magic trick that we're all under, but it takes little bits like that to really prop it up with style. You know, that stuff is flat. Magic tricks like that, just the linguistic complexity and the multiple levels that it's working at, I have to give a wry grin and go, cool, man. If that's you that came up with that, Tyson, my hat is off to you. Probably an entire production crew and script writers and all the rest of it that came up with that little piece, you know, that little pre-rehearsed little bit that he did. You know, it might just be him, but maybe, I don't know. You know, if it is, then, you know, my hat is off to you, regardless of how much you're on our opposing side and deceiving the world with heliocentric nonsense. That was a great trick. I can't deny it.
Well, I got a slide in Master B for you, and we'll delve into this magic trip.
Can I just say something just before
Yeah, go ahead.
just very quickly. What Neil deGrasse Tyson said there is what he basically said is that you're only ever going to see flat on this massive sphere. He's taking away the expectation.
No. He says you can't
I
see
also wanted to
the
add.
Earth curve from 2 millimeters above this beach ball. That stuff is flat. Slap, slap, slap. Well, what he's doing is he's forcing both sides. One with a little dangly carrot of hearing the word flat from his mouth when describing the Earth. That the horizon, Earth curve in his example, cannot be seen from 2 millimeters above the beach ball, which is a physical sphere with a geometric limitation to the view if you're an ant on the beach ball. Well, that's a clever trick to get you as a flat earther to not notice that when you start talking about how the horizon does or doesn't bend at altitude, that you're actually in line with his reification of a physical geometric sphere edge for the horizon, when the horizon's not Earth curve. But you still find yourself saying that it's too far, or not bending, or bending, missing the fact that it's not Earth curve. The horizon isn't Earth curve. But deGrasse Tyson's magic trick gets both sides, flat Earth and globe Earth, to reify the beach ball into the globe and reify the horizon into a physical geometric limitation to your view, and then have you argue amongst yourselves about whether or not it should bend or shouldn't bend at altitude. It's a genius magic trick, you know.
That's what I meant, though. That's what I said. Like I said, he said you're only ever going to see flat on this massive sphere. He's taken away your expectation. He's taken away the expectation to see the curve on this massive sphere. So I'm still on a big sphere, but there'll never be a curve visible. No matter how high I go, it will always be flat on this massive sphere.
Precisely.
That's what he was.
You got the slide up?
Yep.
All right. Here's some angles: acute angle, right angle, obtuse angle, straight angle, reflex angle, and a full rotation. There's a protractor there, top right. That is how a sextant works. That's the principle of a sextant right there. Perpendicular is the zenith. It is the vertical that meets the horizontal. And there's an image of a fellow using a sextant. What's he shooting at, Brian?
Horizon.
Horizon. What's horizon? Horizontal. What is dip correction for anyway? Dip correction is for you to get horizontal. It's for you to get to sea level. So that stuff is flat. Thank you, Neil deGrasse Tyson, because the sextant wouldn't work unless that stuff was flat.
And with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you first and foremost to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, hit the PayPal link to help me out with my enormous bill that's on its way, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!
An angle. So it's an angle measuring device. How do you measure angles? It's right there in front of you on the screen. Not on a curved surface, that's for sure. It's the end of the ball right there.
Is Nathan back?
I am.
All right. I just want to say, because this is a good lead into. I didn't want to bring this up earlier in the show because I didn't think, I don't know if QE's there or if he's listening in or whatever, but often he misses the start for the live show. But QE was saying over the weekend to me, and I was going back and forth with him about the horizon dip correction, that he was saying that it's not a good argument. And I disagree, because he's saying the only argument is the elevation angle. I don't disagree with that. The elevation angle is the argument, right? Because the definition of an elevation angle means you need a horizontal, right? A flat baseline for an elevation angle. But my point being, right, my point to QE was that if you're taking an angle from a boat, right, using the sextant on the water, you're taking an angle from a boat. The angle you take between the celestial body and the horizon will not be geometric. It also will not give you, it won't have a 90 degrees on either side. So my point being is that the horizon dip correction gives you not only does it take it away from being just optical and make it geometric, so it's not optical anymore, it's then purely geometric, but it also gives you the 290s, because for an elevation angle, don't you need a 90? So that's why I disagree, and I say that the horizon dip correction is a brilliant argument. Now,
it's not that it's brilliant or bad. It's integral to the argument, and it supports the notion of the plane being flat because it can't acquire it without it being 90 degrees and your elevation angle in the first instance. But it's a crucial detail that's worthy of understanding, so it can be argued in favour of our position. But it's the consistency of just saying elevation angle, where'd you get it? Well, where they get it from is a flat plane, so it's the more concise argument. I think that might be, I'm just guessing, QE's reasoning. But I did actually read some of what you were saying back and forth, actually, with QE over the weekend. I don't necessarily agree that it's a bad argument. Other than its complexity in terms of if you're going to use it to assert it from the off, where'd you get your angle, where'd you get your straight baseline, is elevation angle at its heart. That is the argument, right? So from that point of view, it's a more concise argument. It doesn't mean yours is better or worse, and it's integral to the process, right? You've got to do a dip correction to lower yourself down to the flat baseline. So it's integral. But if you started off by explaining that to somebody, just off nothing, no springboard into it, you just started explaining it, they'd be scratching their head halfway through. And I think that might be his objection. I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
Well, he's focusing on the concise. Elevation angle is concise. My point being with the horizon dip correction is that you can't have an elevation angle without a 90. Otherwise, it's not an elevation angle. It's an angle, not an elevation angle. And you can't have a 90, right? And in this case, you don't get two 90s without the horizon dip correction. And it's the one thing, with the exception of the definition of elevation angle, right? I don't take that away. With the exception of that, it's the one thing that the ballers will not address. They will not address this part of the use of the sextant. They have yet to address it anyway. So that's
I like to
go on, Ted.
piggyback. Yeah, let me piggyback on what you're saying. They're both the same argument at the end of the day, because you need to have the sextant. Okay, everybody talk, please. Get it out.
I was first.
All right, go.
Well, I was basically saying the same thing that you're trying to say. There's no reason to argue about who says it. But the bottom line is, I would say that there's a time and place to stress what the dip correction is for, instead of leading with that and trying to educate a person on all of this of the counters that some anti-flat earther would give. So preemptively giving them too much information could be unnecessary. So what I say by timing is, when mariners talk about the sextant, when they say that is very accurate, it's when they say you do the dip correction correctly. or doing it at all. So that would be the best, because most times they'll say, but it's not really accurate. It's not really for what you guys are saying it's for, but we have actual, I mean, other than how you use it, it's in all of the books. Everywhere you can find someone talking about it. The reason that you want to do that dip correction is for the precision of the tool.
Who's saying that, Eli?
Saying what?
Who's saying it's not accurate?
It's just some Globert that he was saying it's not really that accurate.
Okay, so citation, please, because you have hundreds and hundreds of years of this tool being practiced, and it's within a half a mile when used properly. It's very accurate. In fact, the U.S. Navy's reinstituted it because of EMP, possible EMP attacks. All the electronics will go down. So they're back to it as the backup plan to all of the electronic way of getting what? The same information that a handheld tool will give you if you sight a star with the horizon and do what? Dip correction. Why? Dip correction is nothing more than getting you horizontal. Because you're in the open ocean, it's tossing and turning. And if you're 10 feet above that tossing and turning, it's very difficult unless what?
What?
Unless you bring it down to the water underneath the boat.
Unless you have something steady to aim at, which is the horizon, because you don't have a landmass. So what's not tossing and turning? The horizon way in front of you. So you sight it on that because that gives you level. It's the only thing that gives you level on the ocean. Let the penny drop, and then you do dip to get level with it.
But okay, what do you do then when the sea is super hard storming, right? And it's already going to be lack of straight line of sight into the distance because of just rain and all that. What do you do then? You just wait for the storm to be over and try again, or?
Yeah. It's very simple. I've read the books, seen the videos. When it gets impossible, you just have your logbook and your dead reckoning position because you've kept it up every hour. Don't think that someone at sea just points
every
the boat.
Hour?
Yeah, they keep it every hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it can get stormy and cloudy, and you can't see any sun, and you can't see any stars. So you might go for a week without any sighting capabilities.
Right. The trick is to know where you've been, and then keep to that course. And then when you can, you check. Why? Well, to make it accurate again, where you may have gone off course from your last position where you checked it. The delusion from people who haven't got the slightest clue is that you're just suddenly in the middle of the ocean, not having the vaguest idea where you are or where you've been. Well, nothing could be further from the case if you're an experienced mariner.
Well, they used
correct.
That's what happens when you go searching for the Hoare value on Bob's diagram.
Before GMT, before Greenwich time, they used the noon sighting of the sun to get latitude, and they would always go and correct themselves every noon and make sure they were on this. So if they were coming from England to the Americas, they'd know which latitude, so they'd get to that latitude, and then they'd sight it at noon. Next day, they sighted at noon. Oh, okay, we're low off. Let's go this way a little bit. And because they didn't have the chronometer, they didn't have longitude yet. And so the noon sighting was just latitude sailing. And it's easy if you just use the highest point in the sky, which is noon, in most cases, give or take a few minutes. And that's how, so they just steered the course of the latitude and used the compass as well. So that's how they used to do it until, they said, we need to figure out longitude. This is a grid system that we've placed over this plane, and we need to do longitude. So how did they do longitude? Well, they did it by Greenwich time. So highest time in the sky at Greenwich, England is 12 noon, let's say. And then you're over here and you're 15 degrees. They go by that. And so you say, well, I'm 3 hours out. Well, if it's 12 noon at Greenwich, what is it if you're going west? Well, it's not even 12 noon yet. It's 9 a.m. So now you say, oh, I must be here. because you're using 12 noon as your marker. That's why you have a clock set for Greenwich and a clock set for your local time. And so, again, these are the ingredients of the whole tool and the books. But the bottom line, if we're looking at the slide, Nathan, is that sextant is an angle measuring device. Angles don't work with curved baselines. There is no such thing as a curved baseline. You can't find one on any angle. Where is this tool supposedly being used on? The surface of the earth. And it works, so it must be flat, baseline on the surface of the earth. Because if it was a globe, the tool would never work. The argument for whether this earth is a ball or a flat plane is over with the tool called the sextant.
Well, isn't the dip correction how they actually trick people, though? Because they use vertical zenith to an arbitrary position that they'll claim is a 90, and then account for dip angle to the horizon and claim that's physical. Well, whereas the sextant uses, your height above the ground beneath you to establish an angle to a star.
You answered it. Sextant, okay. You answered yourself. Dip correction.
No, I wasn't making a question. I was saying that was the trick. I think that's Brian's point, is that's how they trick people.
Yeah, but we're talking about the sextant, how the tool works. Dip correction for that tool is what? Get it to sea level. Well, what's sea level? Well, what's way out there you're pointing at? Horizon? It's the only thing you have that's steady on the ocean. What is it? It's horizontal.
Well, I understand what John is saying, because a lot of the claims that were on a globe was that there was a dip to the horizon. But what this does is it takes the dip that you angled down to the horizon from your ship or from your cliff or whatever you're standing on above the water, and you take the other end where you are and you bring that down to you subtract the height of your eye from where you're taking the angle. You subtract that above the water. You subtract that. You bring the other end down. So they dip down one end and they avoid dipping the other end. And that's my point.
Put up your slides.
Avoid this point.
Put up your 3 slides, Brian.
Yeah, I will in a moment. Yeah, I'm going to do that now in a moment. That's my point, is that they avoid dipping down the other end. The borders avoid this like the plague. Because as soon as they do that, that's 290 degrees and a flat baseline that could be thousands of miles in a straight line. I'll put up the slides there in a moment.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's how they trick people, is they forget about their position and they just want to talk about their arbitrary horizontal to the dip correction. They don't want to talk about what the actual measurements are that you get with the sextant and how you get them.
John, when you look at the picture at the bottom right of the slide I put up, that's Muppet vision, but it's done in a way that gives you the actual view of the sextant, because if you look at the left side, the horizon's in front of you and it's level. And then the Muppet vision of the guy holding the sextant. So now the one Muppet vision we get for them constantly is you're on the ball. And then they've got like the image that's on the screen now. Okay, well, that's not the way you view the horizon. It's never like that. It's flat. You're just 10 feet high above it. It's not like the way this picture shows that's on the screen now.
Right, yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the way they trick people is with that language. But Brian's talking about, what you actually do with the sextant, not what they claim.
Correct. Now, let's identify what the word baseline means. Your baseline. Let's identify the word angle. What does the word angle mean? Okay, let's identify what a protractor does. And when you identify all those things, it can only be flat. And dip correction means you're taking it to the horizontal because you're above it, which means the distance from you to the horizon is all level, all flat when you do dip. That's the purpose of dip, to get you horizontal. To assume the Earth is flat is what dip is all about.
Well, see, that's the thing, though. They never do the dip correction when they're claiming that the horizon's geometric.
Careful. No. When you're doing it in reality and actually holding the sextant, that's what you must do. And you're measuring an angle at the surface. So when you say they don't do that, well, no. But what they do is take what you're actually performing at the surface to measure an angle at the surface and transposing that to the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. So when you say they don't do that, well, no, they don't describe that being done, but to get the angle, you've actually got to physically be on the surface and assume you've got a flat baseline. So that's the bait and switch. Is that your point, and I'm just reiterating your point that you're saying is the magic trick?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to, yeah. That's what they're doing. They're never dealing with the reality. They're just, using their imaginary horizontal to, the dip correction that they never account for unless they take it to the center of Earth, which they don't measure from.
Right, but at which point the dip correction changes. So at that point, when they describe dip correction, if they're talking in context of what they're doing with their Muppet Vision presupposed spherical Earth and the angle coming from the middle and infinitely distant stars in their diagram, well, if you take that to be the case, they then say the word dip. What they then mean is that they are assuming that the horizon, the physical geometric spherage, is below their position and not actually being measured to, other than after the fact. If they were to utilise curve calculations, the angle measurement is no longer being done at the surface. It's only being done from the presupposed centre and utilisation of your zenith at that point, down to the centre using the radius, and then out to an infinitely distant star base for that angle. It's just not what you're doing in reality. That bait and switch is the most obvious. It's not like terrestrial refraction being substituted for the refraction we experience in reality, an R-based refraction. This is a much more or much less subtle bait and switch. You're physically holding something and taking an angle measurement. That's what you're actually doing. Go to Glober and ask how that works when you can't get a baseline from a curved surface, and they'll show you a diagram with an angle coming from the centre of the sphere. It's really obvious bait and switch, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's the crux of their argument, which is sad.
Got a question for Adam before we round out. So, Adam, you there?
Well, after Brian, let me say something as well.
See if I can get
What's
Adam's
this about
attention.
rounding out?
You there, Adam?
I am. I've just got
Busy for a minute. Go ahead, 10th.
No, let Brian go, and then I'll say my piece.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Tenth. Yeah, I have on screen here. I have step one of using a sextant is to take the angle between a celestial object and the horizon. That's step one, right? So this part here, if you can see my mouse, this line here, they have no problem with sending the angle, angling the line down to the horizon, and claiming that's a dip due to Earth curve, right, or globe drop, right? They have no hassle doing that. But when they go to the second part, which is what is going on here? Sorry. The second part, which is this part, where they bring the angle that was the vertex that was at the person's eye down to the water below the boat. That's when they have a problem, because step two of using a sextant is to perform a horizon dip correction, which is to take the original angled vertex and drop it down from the observer's eye line to the water underneath the boat. Warning, do not use step two on the globe model, because this part, as soon as this part happens, then they're admitting a flat. They're admitting flat at that point, and they know it. As soon as they do this part, they're admitting flat. And they never do this. They have to avoid this, even though that's one of the main steps. It's the second step. After you've done all the little corrections you need to do with the sextant, whatever you need to do with the index arm and whatever else, right? Setting it at 40, blah blah blah, right? Once everything else is done, you have your angle, then you do this part, right? Because otherwise, right? I'm just going to go back, right? This here is not a 90, right? And this here is not a 90, so you don't have a 90 either side. Right, so then you do the horizon dip correction and you get a 90 either side, and it's absolutely a geometric flat baseline for hundreds and thousands of miles to the GP of a star. And as soon as they do this part, it's over for them. So they won't address this whatsoever because they can't.
I agree.
What they do is on a globe, you must go directly to step 3, as step 2 is only used in reality and does not work within the globe model. Warning, not to be used with step 2, because this is what they want to do. They want to bring this angle down to the center of a globe, as opposed to where it actually goes, which is down onto the surface of the water, making an absolute geometric double 90 degree.
Perfect timing with the diagrams too. You're right, because that's exactly what John's just discussed and saying this is how they trick you. You're holding the sextant at horizon dip correction point where it says horizon dip correction, there's an arrow. Yeah, that's you holding the sextant. I'll just circle it for my audience's benefit on Brian's diagram. That's you measuring an angle here. Can you just flick to your globe depiction again, please, Brian? As opposed to the angle coming from the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. That's not where you measure the angle. You measure it at the surface. Now, for them to talk about dip correction at this point, they'd talk about the dip to this point here, which is the physical obstruction to things beyond it on a sphere Earth. But that's not what you're using with the sextant, and you're certainly not measuring the angle from the centre. But that is what they will do to bait and switch you. Take an angle off a flat plane with a tool that can only measure 2 straight lines, and then say that that angle is actually coming from the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. And the degrees that you're going to see in terms of the drop for Polaris towards the horizon as you move back, 69 statute miles, they'll say that's you twisting this circle 1 degree. When in reality, go back to the other diagram, please, Brian, if you don't mind. When in reality, it's this angle decreasing by 1 degree as you back away from it. But to get the angle to see that 1 degree difference, both of which are going to be measured against a flat surface because it's 2 straight lines that you're measuring. Can only be flat, can only be straight. That's what an angle is. Not from the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth with infinite star distances, because that's not where you're holding the tool. You're holding it here on the flat plane, which it must be for this to work, and it does. Doesn't work on a curved surface, hence the need to transpose the angle to the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. Did you want to add something, 10th? Hopefully I'll get Adam's attention afterwards.
Yes. It's
Thank you,
a
Brian.
circle. Not... Excellent, Brian.
No worries.
Yeah, it's a circle, not a globe that they put that central angle on, because Black Swan, there is no globe. That's number 1. Number 2, the horizon at sea is the only thing that you shoot at with the sextant, because there is no landmarks. There's nothing else. You're surrounded by ocean. And so you need to get this thing level. So what do they say? Point it at. Point at the horizon. It gives you level. Except you're 10 feet above the level of the ocean, so you need to minus that and dip so that you're even with the horizon. That is the purpose. They're basically saying that between the distance you could see with the telescope on the sextant, the furthest point on the horizon, and everyone knows what that looks like, it is flat from side to side all the way. That is what you got to do when you do dip correction. You got to get even with that. So it's basically saying you got to treat that you're on the flat surface, because for the sextant to work, you need a flat baseline, or else you can't get the angle. I quote, this altitude, this height of the sun or of any star in the sky is called its altitude. And so the altitude always is an angle to be measured in degrees and minutes. The point directly overhead, it's its zenith. The angle between lines drawn to horizon and zenith is 90 degrees, or a right angle. Official, it's over.
Perfect.
Outstanding.
Adam, are you there? If not, it's going to be the end of the show.
Okay. Blue, dark blue, yellow.
Oh, there we
End
go.
of the show? What?
Adam, at the beginning of the show, somebody asked a question in terms of how does the Rayleigh criteria with its 1.22 over lambda, what is the calculation of the Rayleigh criteria? I can't remember off the top of my head.
1.22 times the wavelength of light, isn't it? But
over the aperture.
Yeah, times the aperture size.
Yes.
Okay, so how does that translate into the begging the question, proof of nothing perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator when that has 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet? Is it a coincidence?
Yeah, I think yes and no. Is my honest answer. I don't know. I'm just noticing these things. I think I mentioned it the other day that there's this. It was on Mitchell's show. I'd stuck it in there when Brian was being interviewed. I don't know is the honest answer, but I don't think coincidence is there, because if you look at it, we're still conflating. We're still conflating a bit like with the perspective hijacking formula. If you look at what's happening with this imagery and stuff that the ballers are doing, we're still trying to take visual readings with perspective and convert them into orthographic implications. So my honest answer is I don't know. I'm working on it and trawling through pages of numbers that Temp's sending me and documents to try and get to this. I think there's something in it, and I think it is perspective hijacking is what I'd say, and I don't think 1.22 keeps cropping up for coincidence.
Okay.
May
well,
I
hopefully
question about that?
Go ahead.
What is the mile based on?
It depends what you mean. Your mile is based on the sun, a nautical mile, so it's time, isn't it? Okay, so that's its purpose, and then the land mile's based on that. But all of this is based on the transit of the sun initially.
With that, though, I am going to say another huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. Of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, hitting the PayPal link to help me out with my projector bill that's on its way, and all that good stuff. Also, below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.